our worst day is usually our best day. It's when, something you're doing a really hard scene, it's a very emotional scene, something with a lot of stakes to it. Those are usually our best days, the stuff we live for. So we love it when we have a hard day.
And I have the distinct pleasure of moderating this panel with a very talented actor who's in all kinds of shows that we can't talk about, Mr. Michael Cudlitz. You, sir.
Hi,
welcome,
guys.
Michael.
Thank you.
How are you enjoying the con so far?
Oh, it's great. You guys are awesome.
Well, we're in Connecticut, so it has to be awesome, right? I can say that. I was born in Connecticut, so, we're all good. So, Michael, I know, first of all, there is a question mic over there. If you have any questions for Michael, please feel free. There may be some questions that he may not be able to answer, or might have to go into convolutions of verbiage to not answer in an incorrect way, but we'll handle it. But what I like to ask...
We'll figure it out.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
Or not. Or I'll get yelled at on Monday. Which is probably what's going to happen.
We'll try to avoid that. So what I like to ask is, when you decided to become an actor, what was your inspiration? What was the point in your life when you're like, this is what I want to do?
We were actually just talking about this a little while ago outside. Started when I was very young. I remember doing plays in school from the 3rd grade on. I remember my mom particularly telling me that I used to act out all the commercials in between on television. If you're anywhere close to my age, you remember every product had a jingle, a jingle or a slogan or a kind of a catchphrase. And, obviously they're designed to sell the product, so you remember it, so it is catchy. So my mom said I used to always get up and act out the jingles and stuff on the commercials in between shows. Again, did theater throughout my childhood, all through school. And honestly, it was like an escape. It was just a way to just not be in the house. And I loved it, Never thought that I was going to be able to do it as a career. Was born in New York, raised in Jersey, and it was very blue collar where I grew up. I learned furniture building and construction from my dad, and never thought that I could make a living as an actor. If that's something you could even do, that wasn't really in the plan. It was sort of like, yeah, that's great. Go get a job. Do your little theater thing, and I was fine with that. I assumed that I was going to, sort of do community theater and just do stuff on the side till I was tired of it. But I would be in construction or engineering or something like that, as a profession. Went to school for engineering. Started to go to college for engineering, and my dad pulled me out basically and was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "I'm getting a backup." He's like, "You have a backup. You know how to do construction. I taught you how to build furniture. You love doing it. You have a backup that you actually love. Why don't you go try to pursue what you want to do?" And I took that and quit school the next day, which he was then like, "What the hell are you doing?" I said, "I'm doing the thing." He goes, "No, you don't finish the year or move, don't just quit." I go, "No, I'm done. You're right. I'm going to go do this other thing." So I applied to an art school, CalArts, California Institute of the Arts, transferred in because of everything I had done prior in school. I was able to transfer in as a second-year student and only act for that whole time for the next 3 years and get a degree. Yes, there is such a thing as a degree in acting, and I have one, which is weird. And obviously it worked out. But I did use my my skills that my dad taught me to pay my way through school. And after school, for the next 10 years, I was doing film and construction for film and television. That's how I supported myself and my family until Band of Brothers, which I was able to move out of and become full-time actor after that. So I always tell people, if you're not doing what you love to do, because I'm fortunate enough to be doing something for a living that I've wanted to do my entire life, that I love doing. Had I not been doing that, I would have done the construction, which I also love doing. So when people ask me to, advise young actors, say, what would you recommend? I always say, find something else that you love doing as well, because there's enough things out there. You might not be making the money you want to make, but you can be happy doing something else, even if you're not able to do right now the thing that you love more than anything. And then eventually you'll get there. But too many people I see are not doing what they love to do and doing something that's just like, excuse my French, but just fucking miserable. And you're just like, why? It's like, well, I want to do my thing. It's like, yeah, you can do your thing, and there's like a million other things that are close to it or near it that you can go do and at least not be miserable. So that's a very long answer to a very short question.
Well, I'm supposed to ask short questions. You're supposed to have long answers, so it's all good. Do you still occasionally make furniture?
I don't, because I wear these now, and when these hang from a lanyard like this, they get sawdust on them, and then you're like, fuck. It gets very frustrating, so I decided I'm done. So my kids use the shop now, which is good. Okay,
cool. Well, I'm glad that you were able to follow your dream as an actor, and you've been part of some shows that have been extremely popular. Other than hopefully some financial benefits for those, what has been being part of the acting world done for you?
Oh my gosh, I've been part of projects that I've done. Being part of Band of Brothers was like a life-changing experience for all of us involved. The way this project affected the families and the vets themselves when they were still here. We lost our last vet very specifically to the 506, 101st. Fairly recently, we lost, within the past 12 months, we lost our last two. Well, maybe it's a little more than 12 months. We lost our last officer, I think spring of last year, and one of the company members, like 4 or 5 months ago. About a year ago, because it was before. We just celebrated our 22nd anniversary in September, so it was before that. So I guess it's been a little longer than I thought. But you often get to do projects that are hopefully entertaining and get to take people out and forget what they're dealing with in life for a moment and sort of get transported into a story that you're telling. Very rarely do you get to do something that means something beyond just the storytelling and affects people's lives and families in the way that Band of Brothers did. So for me, that whole process was amazing at the time and has continued to be amazing, even as it affects ourselves and future generations. For those who have seen Band of Brothers or those who have yet to see it, it still holds up. And I think it's not just because I was part of it, but I still think it's one of the most important pieces of television ever produced.
Well, that's awesome. Again, any questions, please line up over here. And it looks like we have our first taker.
Hello.
Say your name before your question.
My name is Tom. I'm from New York.
Hi, Tom.
It's a safe question you'll be able to answer. As someone that was in your whiskey tasting on the cruise, number one, have you tried...
That was a shit show.
It was a shit show. But have you tried Jeffrey Dean Morgan and Hillary's new gin and rye?
I'm not a gin person. I haven't tried either. But I'm the gin. I was kind of disappointed in them. But That's all right. I've been disappointed in him before.
Also, as a bar owner, what's your favorite liquor?
I think my favorite whiskey or bourbon is Weller Antique right now. My favorite tequila is Fortaleza. I don't know.
If you could have any drink right now, what would you ask for?
Probably
I
a
only
nice
get Poland
tea.
Spring.
Okay.
Hi, my name's Melissa. Actually,
Hi, Melissa.
I remember seeing you, my most memorable role that you were in was actually in The Negotiator.
Awesome.
And when I saw you on The Walking Dead, I was like, oh my God, that's the sharpshooter from The Negotiator.
That's great.
And so I just wanted to, one, say that you were awesome in both, and thank you. But just what was it like? What would you say the difference is between being on a movie set and being on a TV set?
The biggest difference between film and television is just the format. Obviously, the time you get to spend with these characters. And I think that from myself being a fan of television, I love spending time with the characters and seeing where they go and the arcs that they take. Perfect example is the show, one of the shows that I was on. There was a character called Glenn, and I loved his arc from the beginning, from when we met him as like basically a boy in the show, and we saw him become a man and make choices that men should make, and you sort of became a moral compass of the show, and you fell in love, and you sort of go on this journey, and conversely, Carol, or not even conversely, but as well, Carol as well, grew, and became this amazingly strong, confident woman, from where she had started in the beginning, as someone who was just broken, and to be able to overcome that and still process all the loss that she had along the way. You don't get to do that in the same way in a film.
Do you prefer?
Typically it's an event that drives what happens in a movie, and then in long format television, the characters drive what's happening, and you're on the ride with the characters going through an event, as opposed to the event, seeing how the event affects the characters.
Which do you prefer?
I prefer generally television, but I love doing a cool little thing in a film.
And spoiler alert, Abraham's death was actually the one that made me the most upset, because he was my favorite character.
Thanks. We always talked about that. I talked to Steven about that, and I was very concerned that, because I was a fan, he and Carol were my favorite characters. I was very concerned that I said, I don't want to do anything that's going to dilute your passing, because the fans are going to, I want to experience that purely. Yeah. And he was, we both thought it was, or I thought, and I think he agreed with me, that it was too much at once. They should have separated it, and I think the audience would have benefited from that as well. And I've said that from the beginning, so is it no new, call Scott Gimple and tell him that Cudlitz says it was too many. It wasn't that. It was too many. It was too much.
Yeah, it definitely was.
So
it hurt.
Yeah.
Not gonna lie. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that caused a lot of problems, but I don't think you necessarily overshadowed the death of Glenn. In fact, most people mention Glenn first.
I think it diluted, and it diluted.
It took away from both of you.
Yes, exactly.
We have another question.
I do. John, sorry.
It's a Southland question.
Southland question, yes.
You called me John.
All right. Having worked in law enforcement for the last 17 years and seeing that show, everybody in the locker rooms was talking about your character the absolute most. Okay? Being said, where did you get your inspiration? How did you do your research on that? Because you were dead spot on. For anybody who's been on the job for 10 plus years, this has been an FTO. It was amazing.
Awesome. Thank you, first off. That's another show that that was a gift. You know, John Wells and their company came to us and wanted to tell a cop show in a different way that it had been never told before.
Yeah, it was honest.
There's the stories don't change, the way the stories are told changes. They did it with ER. They took the medical drama and sort of stood it on its ear, and they wanted to do the same thing with a cop show. And Chris Chulak, who is our directing producer, and he was the one who came up with the idea. Ann Bitterman created the show, but Chris Chulak came up with the idea and brought it to Ann Bitterman to write. Chris wanted to do a show that showed the Los Angeles that he grew up in. You know, everything up until then was, you know, shows like Silk Stocking and Pacific Blue. You know, you have it was like palm trees, and it was like Baywatch with cops. That's what was available on television. And he wanted to do something more like a throwback to Adam 12, but make it current, you know, and really represent what was happening in law enforcement and in the communities and currently with the LAPD. So for myself, I found the project like everything else, you know, just got an audition, you know, sort of read it, fell in love with it. Once I was cast, though, we did a bunch of ride-alongs, you know, a lot of ride-alongs. I think I've done over 20 ride-alongs, which is, for those who've never done a single ride-along, I highly recommend it. Actually, I recommend doing 2, because usually the first one, you get the curse of the ride-along, which nothing happens at all. You do a ride-along and you're literally like, okay. So this is it, huh? It's like, no, not really. But if you do your second, third, fourth, fifth, you start to see some pretty crazy stuff. And it puts in context what the men and women go through on the streets every day. And for people who at times can be extremely critical of any law enforcement, I highly recommend you do a ride-along. So it doesn't excuse any bad behavior. We would always say nobody hates a bad cop more than another cop. But what you see that these men and women have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, back to back to back to back to back, gives you a little bit more of an insight as to what may or may not have happened or been going on with someone who pulls you over, and you're sort of like, well, you know, you pulled me over and this guy was such an asshole. Well, okay, the guy just came from like a double homicide or something, or just came from something horrific that you don't know anything about. Is it an excuse to be treated like shit because you're going 5 miles over the speed limit? No. But again, it puts it in context. And what we did was we spent a lot of time with the men and women of the LAPD, and it was incredibly enlightening. Because it's a big city is very different than a small town, and you know it's a lot of stuff went down. So I love that we were able to take all these characters, again, talking what we were talking about a minute ago, the long format, and really spend time with these characters. You know, John Cooper was for those who hadn't seen Southland, he's a character I played was a training officer. He was a P3+1, which is pretty much the highest you can get rank you can go before you go sergeant. And the way it works in LAPD is that sergeants are kind of a supervisory position. P3+1 is you'd be a training officer, or you'd be 2 in a car. LAPD does 2 in a car, and sergeant is 1 in a car, and they usually show up after the fact. Like a call goes in and the car will report, and then a sergeant will do follow-up. Very rarely will they show up before the 2 show up, and that's for officer safety. But we had these incredibly complicated characters. John was happened to be a drug addict because he happened to be in this horrific accident that really screwed up his back, and he got addicted to painkillers, and he wanted to stay on the job, but he was trying to manage his pain medication, and obviously not going well. Obviously should not have been on the streets with a gun, and should not have been training people, and he was. And I think that it showed a real human side of, you know, what was going on with these officers and in processing everything that most people think that, you know, or don't associate with officers having to process, being people. he was gay, which at the time in the department was something that wasn't, I don't even know if it wasn't tolerated, if it was just not very common. Everybody who'd served with him, he was in 20 years, they knew, but it was not talked about. But he was one of those people who, it didn't define him, you know? One of his things that he had said was that, you know, he's got a lot of problems, and being gay was not one of them. He was a mess, and he was so much fun to play from an acting standpoint. Every single one of the characters had a lot going on. Again, if you haven't seen the show, watch it. Don't watch it just yet. Wait till we're not on strike anymore and then watch it. You know, for me, the work came with spending the time with these men and women, doing the ride-along, seeing the different personalities, seeing the things that joined them. There's a commonality, there's an energy, there's a mindset that they get into it for mostly the same reason. They want to make a difference. And then the job changes you. And we saw that from spending time with these men and women. It's one of you know, up with Band of Brothers, it's something I'm incredibly, incredibly proud to have been a part of.
Should be.
So thank you for your service.
Now, Michael, you obviously put a ton of time researching, you know, being a police officer. Have you had opportunities? I know you don't always have the opportunity to spend the time researching a role, but have there been other opportunities where you've had that time and you were able to really learn a lot about the character before diving in?
Yeah, there's it's interesting. There's this wonderful story. Chris Chulak, he's my directing mentor. He was, I was speaking of him earlier. He was the sort of the creative spark behind Southland. But Chris, I don't know if you guys watched ER, but Chris directed a lot of the most notable ERs. He directed the Emmy Award-winning ER. Like, I think it's still one of the most watched hours of television in television history. Something like 27 million people watched this event happen, and it was the George Clooney episode where the kid gets stuck in the water, the thing is flooding up, and there's this image of him, I get choked up thinking about it, of George coming up out of the water with this kid. And they won the Emmy, and Chris directed that. And, you know, Chris pushed me into directing when we started working on Southland. And so I owe, you know, a lot to Chris. And I completely lost my train of thought telling the ER story. So what was the question?
So as far as researching other roles, what has been your ability to do that for other roles that you've taken and put the time that you did?
Great Chris story to tie that in. Oh, yes, okay. So Chris used to talk about when he would audition people for ER. And he tells this story about this guy who came in to audition for, he was a heart surgeon, pediatric heart surgeon. And, you know, the guy came in, and he's like getting ready to do his audition, and they had a really great conversation. The guy was not nervous at all, and, you know, so Chris says, okay, let's go. And they get into it, and the guy comes running in the room. He's like, okay, we got to get this kid, get him on the table. You know, he goes through all this stuff, like just really, really fast and screaming and running around. He's like, whoa, okay, stop. So when I say he was calm, meaning that he wasn't nervous about the audition, this is how he was trying to play it, because his reasoning was he was a pediatric heart surgeon, and this was really important, and it had to be done, and we had to save this kid. And Chris was like, you do this for a living. This is like, you are the preeminent heart surgeon. This is not something you're freaking out about. You are completely in control. You are the only one that can save this kid, and you know it. The circumstances of what's happening in that moment don't define how you are acting as a doctor. You're a doctor. Put that side away. You do your research, you study, I train as a cop. That's great. You put that all away. You are just a person who has this skill set. There's no like, oh, there's a cop. They do all these things. It's like, no, you learn how to do all these things. You learn how to be a doctor. You study, you know the operation, but you are coming into that situation with that skill set. That skill set doesn't define you. So the best thing and the best way I can describe sort of doing research is you do all of this research for all of these roles, really so you can forget it. So I can come in and be this person, be this compassionate person, or this person showing up on site, on scene, to deal with what's happening. But out of the corner of my eye, I see somebody, possibly coming at me with a knife. Now my training tells me I know that this person, how quickly they can close distance and where I have to stop them from carrying a knife. I don't overreact to it. It's just part of what is in me. Most of the stuff that I do get time to study as much as I can and to do the research. But the biggest thing you can do is, and the most important thing is, do the research and then sort of forget it, and put it out of the way, and figure out what kind of person that person is based on the material that you have, the script that you have. It's not always on the research, but it's, the research is probably the most important work you can do.
Sounds like the guy who was very freaking out about get the kid on the table. It's hard to maintain that energy if that's your day job. If you're doing it once.
It's less interesting, actually. You're more interested in somebody who's, really confident. If you ever had a doctor who's told you something, you don't want them like, well, I don't know. It doesn't look good, and we're going to maybe try this, and it'd be like, holy crap. Like, that's not who you want as your doctor. You want the doctor who's going to be like, okay, this test came back, not great. Here's what we're going to do. This is what we're doing. And you're like, oh, okay. You're in control. Now I believe you're my doctor. You're not terrified. I'm the one who should be terrified, not you. So.
Absolutely. Now, I believe there was a quote from you saying, like, most people don't like challenges in their jobs, but actors love them.
Yes. I don't know if that's true, but I feel like it's true.
I generally, in my day job, don't really like.
It was more, and that was. I do actually stand by that in the context of when I answered it, because people had said, it comes up as like, what's your worst day? And what I was talking about is our worst day is usually our best day. It's when something you're doing a really hard scene. It's a very emotional scene. Something with a lot of stakes to it. Those are usually our best days, the stuff we live for. So we love it when we have a hard day. That's mostly what that was in reference to. But yeah, I stand by it.
Have there been any particular experiences that have been very hard for you portraying a character emotionally that just stick out in your mind? Like, my God, I was like, afterwards I needed like 10 minutes in my trailer or, to walk away from that for a while.
There's interestingly enough, I hadn't really thought about this in a while. Anthony Michael Hall is here over the weekend. He's with us, and I played his father in Dead Zone in Flashback. So I was father to a young, like a 6-year-old Anthony Michael Hall, and the scene called for me to be, specifically because it was something he was reacting to, called for me to be hysterically crying, sobbing for like 2 days straight. Literally every scene, because it was flashing back to a specific incident that had happened. So his memory of it was very specific. So it wasn't like where the actor can, sort of take a little bit of, liberty with it and I'm gonna do a little something I want to do. It's like, no, it was really specifically dictated as to what I had to be doing at that moment, because that's what he was telling his counselor, I believe at the time, or remembering it. And I remember thinking, like, initially I was like, oh man, this stuff is great. This is going to be fantastic. It's like, I read it. It was awesome. And then I got hired and I went up to Canada, and I remember thinking, oh shit, I got to do this now. And I had never done something like that, where I had to live in that space for a really long time. And it was hard. It was incredibly hard to sort of get there and stay there, but it was incredibly satisfying in the end, because I was able to get there. But it's that jumping off moment where you're not sure if your shoot's going to open, and there's 150 people watching, staring at you. Okay, what's he going to do? Yes, I feel the same way. Often. See, we need more of that. We need to remember that.
I hope they're not going to do that for 2 days straight.
I would love that. The only time I don't love that is on a plane. But even then, it's okay.
So with these roles, you looked at the one on the Dead Zone and you were like, this is awesome. What do you look for in particular when you're going after a particular role or accepting a role?
Most times, most actors, and I mean most actors, if they tell you anything other than this, they're just full of shit. The power we have is to say no, that we're not going to do a particular role. But the idea of like going after a role, or this is how I choose what I'm going to do, you don't get a lot of choices. Stuff comes to you. You can absolutely make opportunities, but generally speaking, things are brought to you and you can either do them or not. There's not too much of like, oh, I heard about this thing, I'm gonna go get that. That's not how it works. Not at my level, not even at higher levels than me. There's very, very, very few people that are able to go, oh, I want to go do that. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, I'm developing something right now, and when you guys find out what it is in a few months, you're going to be like, people would be killing to do that. Like, everybody's going to want to do that. It doesn't matter, because we have a team of 6 people that are producing this thing, and we know who we want. And we have our own list of who we want, and then there's a bunch of people who are going to want to do it, and that list and those people don't necessarily line up. So it doesn't matter if you want to do it. If you're not on our list of who we see, we may not even ever know that you wanted to do it. So anyone who's coming out saying, oh, this is how I choose they're kind of full of crap. I'm sorry. It's just how it works.
Yeah, well, you're independent contractors and...
Yeah, unless you're making your own stuff and you're then 100% you're doing what you want to do. But it's rare. It's really rare.
So do you find at this point in your career, when you're approached about roles, are you doing more auditions and commentary tests, or is that like basically they say, we love your work? I audition. I still regularly audition for film. I don't audition that much for television. That's very fortunate. They will come to me and see if I'm interested in something. That's awesome.
And I do, and I say no a lot now. I'm fortunate in that way. My wife and I have planned pretty well throughout my career and hers, and we have some. Gentleman was just talking about. We have some speakeasies. We have 2 cigar whiskey bars in Atlanta, 1 in Nashville, 1 outside of Dallas, and 1 opening down in Brickell, probably in September. So I've been, again, fortunate to be able to get involved with stuff that I love to do. So I'm able to say no to stuff that I would have said yes to in order to put my kids through school, 6 years ago. Now I get to say, no, you know what, go find someone else who would love to do it, which is good. I think that's good for everyone.
What generally makes you say no to a project? Is it the time commitment or just not connecting with?
Usually it's the writing. It would be a no. But sometimes it's weird because sometimes bad writing, and there's a lot of amazing writing out there. So it's not like a lot of no's, but it's amazing how bad writing will make you go, yeah, no, I'm not doing that. And then sometimes something's either parts of it are bad or it's just hideous, and you kind of go, I could fix this, which is kind of sick because you're putting yourself in a situation where you know something's not good, but you're like, I'm going to fix it. This is exciting to me because I see potential here, and you do that, and I've done that a number of times. I've done some really, really great work in a lot of shitty movies. That's how I look at it. It's probably just as crappy as the movie, but that's not how I feel about it.
Well, that's awesome. When you're not acting, well, first of all, more on the business side, how important is it for actors, once they attain a measure of financial success, to diversify and, look at other ways of keeping the flow, opening speakeasies or...
That's individuals, I think if you're very aware, if you're like really aware as an actor, it could end at any time. If you've been doing it, I've been, again, very fortunate. I've been doing it 30 years more. And I have friends who are incredibly talented who have stopped working. They're just one day, they're just not working anymore. Not getting any phone calls, not auditioning, not doing any roles, and it just stops. And I think if you're paying attention, you see that. And if it happens, you don't have to like it, but if you've been doing it for 20, 30 years and it happens, if you're surprised, then you are really not paying attention to what is going on in the world. Because it just happens, and there's no reason for it. There's no like, oh, you did this, or you pissed somebody off, or you what. It just stops sometimes. For women even more so than men. And again, a little less now. Things are, I think, from what I see, things are getting better. Women are able to work longer than they have been in the past. It's still not good at all. But for me, I don't know. Again, grew up in New Jersey. I'm going to take care of my family. I'm going to make sure that, like, if shit hits the fan, I'm ready. That's how I was raised. And so we diversified as soon as we were able to. And this, depending upon how long the strike goes, my bars will help carry me through that. So I'm fortunate that way, again.
Well, sounds like a wise way to go. So what do you do when you're not working? What are you into? What are your hobbies?
Sit on my butt. No.
Is there another place to sit?
Yeah, well, lay down.
Laying down is good.
Sit in my hammock. Smoke cigars. Hang out. What do I do? My wife and I love to travel. We've real fortunate. We're able to go and do a trip to South Africa. We were in Zimbabwe a month ago. I'm involved with a group called Wild Aid. They deal with the stripping of rhino and elephant horns and tusks. It's educational mostly. It just shows what if you buy trinkets that are made out of ivory. You are supporting these elephants and rhinos getting murdered for only their tusks. And we teach people that basically if you stop just buying those things, the demand dries up and they don't kill the animals anymore. It's literally that simple. You stop doing it, there's no demand, and elephants get to live. So being involved with this group, we had come in contact with some people who run these safaris, and we were approached and then asked if we wanted to go, and we said yes, so we went and did a 2-week safari in Africa, which was, I think it was life-changing for my wife. For me, it was just really cool, because everyone always says, oh my God, that's life-changing. I'm like, well, I don't know, pretty awesome. I don't know if it was life-changing. So, yeah, travel and whiskey, cigars. That's all I
Travel,
got.
whiskey, cigars. Sounds like a good time. Again, we have a microphone over here. If you have questions, I could talk to them all day, but they're going to stop me eventually. I do want to kind of go back, because you were a zombie. You didn't get to be a zombie in that
Buffy.
certain show, but in Buffy, what are your memories of that? It was kind of a comedic episode. But
It was. I think James Whitmore Jr. directed that episode. I had known. He had directed one of my first TV shows I was on called Against the Grain. There's absolutely no chance of you ever seeing that. So that's not stepping on anyone's toes. That show is dead and gone. It was kind of the precursor to Friday Night Lights. It was absolutely based on the same book, but it was way, way before its time. But the show aired, remember the show premiered on a Friday night in the fall. And at the time, the research that the studio did, because they had said, are you sure we want to air this on a Friday night? Isn't that when people watch football? And they had said something like, only something, I forget the number, but I want to say it was like 6 or 8 million people, only 6 or 8 million people watch football on Friday nights. And then when we did more research into it, we found out that it was between 6 to 11 million people watch football in Texas alone on Friday nights. So they didn't really plan out this whole, we'll air it on Friday nights thing. So we wound up doing just a season. Ben Affleck was the lead of that. It was amazing, for the time, it was an amazing television cast. Wayne Kramer was in it, Stephen Tobolowsky, John Terry. I mean, these incredible TV actors. And the show failed because nobody watched it, because the target audience was out watching the real thing that night.
Well, cool. We have a question.
I wanted to ask about Beverly Hills 90210. I read you started building sets for them. What was the atmosphere like? Was it friendly? Did they know you were also an actor? Did you have to audition for that?
They did. I was. Thank you for doing your research. I did. I was the construction coordinator on the original Beverly Hills 90210. I had started as the construction foreman on it, and then my buddy, who was my boss, he wound up leaving the show to go. He went to Charlotte, North Carolina, to go shoot Wild Horses Can't Be Broken, and they left me in charge. And I had never done the job before, and so I was supposed to finish up like 3 weeks, and then the first 6 episodes will have aired, and then we could wrap up and be finished. And then like 2 weeks before we were done, so a week into that, Beverly Hills 90210 premiered, biggest premiere in television history, at least on Fox, went through the roof. They immediately ordered 14 more episodes, and then continued our contracts, and then turned to me and said, okay, you're our new construction coordinator. And having never done the job before. I was like, okay. It's like, I don't have any tools. I mean, I have my hand tools and whatever, I was borrowing from my buddy who left town, and they said, well, we'll set you up, go get what you need, and we'll put you on tool rental, and we'll double your tool rental for the first 3 months so we can offset the cost, but you're running the department. I was like, all right. I mean, I had nothing to lose. I could just accept my job, which was supposed to end in a week anyway. So eventually that show went union, and I went union with it. So I'm I'm a member of a lot of unions. 14 years vested in IATSE, Local 44. I have a pension. I have, I think, a $270 pension coming from my construction for the short amount of time that I did it. While working on the show, I was approached by the producers who said, hey, we heard you were an actor, but we just want to let you know it's a conflict of interest for us to put you on the show. So we don't want to hear about that you're an actor, like ever. I said, I never thought about bringing it up. I said, I'm here to do my construction. I take my time and I go do my auditions, and I got my side thing going, and thank you for letting me do that. But I'm here to do one thing, and that's build your sets. And they said, good, because that's what we want you to do. Don't even think about it. I said, okay. At some point, A River Runs Through It came out, a film that I had done. And then they called me in for another meeting. They said, well, we didn't know you were really an actor. Everybody says they're an actor, so we just wanted to kind of tamp it down before it happened. I said, okay, that's fine. I don't need, I'm here to do one thing. They said, no, actually, we have something we want you to do. We're looking for big guys who look young for the steroids episode, and we wondered if you would come in and audition for us. And I was like, well, what happened to the conflict of interest thing? Like, well, it's, we'll figure that out. I said, okay. So I went and auditioned, and obviously got it. And they've resolved the conflict of interest issue, I guess, because it was no longer a conflict of their interest. And they were great to me. I wound up doing 13 episodes over the course of the time I was there. I was coordinating at the same time that I was on the show. And so I would show up, we'd do an install at a location, I would actually do a scene, I would change my clothes, I would stay, I'd help them strike the set, and then go home. And this one went on and on till Beverly Hills, till Band of Brothers. And that's when I left, full-time left doing it. Because I would go back, I would shoot something like an episode of The Practice, and then like the next day I would be back doing construction. It was just, I would go back from one to the other. So they were great. I'm still in touch with a lot of those people who were on crew, a lot of the actors. Luke Perry was one of my closer friends until his passing. But we stayed really close afterwards. Our kids are really close in age. And the whole experience was incredible. Just a really good group of people and a really crazy time in my life, going back and forth. So, yeah. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I would like to know, what's the story behind the Bisquick in one of the episodes of The Walking Dead when you told Glenn?
The Bisquick? What's behind the Bisquick?
Yes.
Pancakes, my friend. Pancakes. It was written in the script. For those of you who don't know, there was a scene where they're showing Maggie and Glenn's ultrasound sonogram, and Abraham asks him if, when you were pouring the Bisquick, were you planning on making pancakes? Because they got a little pancake. And apparently he was planning on making pancakes. So they had a pancake. That's the story. We did turn it into a fundraiser, though. I guess
yes.
that's the story behind the story behind the story. I kept getting on my social media, people #Bisquick. And I was like, what? This is crazy. This is awesome. And people wanted me to sign that on their photos. And I was literally like, how can I take this? I see people all the time taking things and turning them into, like, taking a viral moment and doing something positive with it. was like, what can I possibly do with this? And I was like, I don't know. So I reached out to Bisquick, and I said, hey, I'm thinking about doing a food drive, and I'm wondering if you guys would help us out. And they found out about it, and they were like, absolutely. So when we were doing Walker Stalker conventions, they would, every time we would move into a new city, they'd send like 2 pallets of Bisquick to be donated to the local food shelter or food pantry. And we just took that and expanded on it and made it a food drive, and we're able to do a little bit of good. Because you guys are awesome. That's it.
That's very awesome.
You're all fired. It's hard to not be able to like really talk about work when you want to talk about work. There's so many Superman related things I think we should be talking about, but can't.
Well, I do want to ask, I know in addition to doing construction work and being an actor, you've also done some directing. How did you get into that, and is that something you want to do a lot more of?
Got into directing, my buddy Chris Chulak, again from Southland, he was pushing me into directing. Had Southland gone another year, I would have directed on that show. But we didn't. We actually all would have directed, myself, Regina King, Ben McKenzie, and Sean Hattasey. Regina did wind up directing the year prior. I started directing on Walking Dead. Was given an opportunity, spoke with Scott Gimple when I first came on as an actor, and he said, what are what's your vision for your career? It was just a general interview. I'd already been sort of hired already. I said, well, the last job I came off of, I was getting ready to direct. I said, and I will want to talk to you about that sometime in the future. I said, but considering we just met, I wouldn't expect you to sort of hire me as a director. I said, if we spend some time together and we realize that our storytelling, sort of aesthetics are the same, then maybe we'll talk about it. And when I left the show, he said, we have to refigure, because we want you guys to basically be quiet for a year, and we don't really want you to work for a year afterwards. We're gonna have to figure out some contract stuff. So when we talk about that, do you want to talk about directing in that, or do you want to leave that for later? And I basically said, I don't want to ever be in a situation where you guys are contractually obligated to have me direct, because I can't think of a shittier way to be forced on a group of people. Is like, well, we have to say his contract. That's why he's directing. So I wanted to be there directing only if they wanted me there to direct. I said, so let's keep that separate. So we sorted all that out, and then a year later, they came to me and they said, we really would love for you to come back and direct. So I did. So I came back in season 9, and then I did 2 episodes in season 10, and then I did 1 in season 11, and then they trusted me to go over to World Beyond to go direct a couple episodes over there on their first season, which is, I directed 2 episodes of the first 10. So it's like, very much was part of helping to define what that show was. And I was supposed to come back the second season, but I was up in Toronto shooting Clarice during COVID, so there was an overlap. And with COVID, everything, we got locked down in certain places. Like Toronto, my wife couldn't even come visit me because she would have to quarantine for 2 weeks separately from me before she could see me. So we had like a 3-week break for Christmas, and I went home for 6 days and then flew back to Toronto to quarantine for the last 2 weeks of my break so I could be back at work up there on time. So the direction, I'm going to be doing more of it. Can't say what on, but I think it's pretty obvious. Other things we can't talk about. Yeah, I'm loving it. I had a great time. They were amazing to me. The cast was incredible. I think actors really love being directed by other actors, because there's an understanding, and especially with someone who's been on the show as long as I have. I know all the subtleties of the character, not all the subtleties, but I know a lot of the subtleties between the characters. So I know who the audience cares about, and to make sure that we have coverage of them, even if they're not talking, because you want to know what they're thinking. And there's a lot of directors who will come in to a show that they don't really know, and they just make sure they point the camera at anyone who's talking, when sometimes that's the least important person. You really are more interested in how the people you care about are reacting to what's being said than you are to what is being said, or who is saying it. So, yeah, I loved it, and I'm looking forward to doing it more.
Awesome. Well, we look forward to, on whatever shows that we can't talk about, seeing your work.
Stuff.
And hopefully, do you want to mention anything about the strike, your personal thoughts on it, or before we wrap up? We only have a couple minutes, unless someone wants to run over and ask a question.
Yeah, you can still run over and ask a question as well. But no, the strike is, there's a lot of things that need to be worked out that have been sort of kicked down the road for a long time. It goes all the way back to DVDs, when the studio took a lot of our residuals away and said, we don't really know what's going to happen with DVDs. We're not sure if they're going to work out, but trust us, and we'll get back to you on the next negotiation. We lost a lot during that. So much to the point now we're at a place where we can't fund our pension and health properly. So it's sort of like there's nothing really to lose at this point for us to put our feet down and sort of say, no, we're going to fight for what we need, because they've taken away everything from us. And I'm not talking about the people who are making, just an obscene amount of money. And there are some of those, but the rank and file, the sort of the working actors, the guys and gals that you see, you love watching them every week, and you're like, oh, I know that person. You don't necessarily know their name, but you know their work. They're not making a living. They're doing other jobs. And the studios are making millions off of them. And there's an incredible imbalance right now, and it needs to be corrected, and it will be. I have faith that they're all going to come and everyone's going to do the right thing, and ultimately nobody's going to be ecstatic with the deal, but everybody will be happy that we're all back to work making money. I think that the last 2 weeks have shown that, between Sound of Freedom, Barbie, and Oppenheimer, that there's a little bit of money to be made in the movie industry still. They do work when they don't suck. That's what everyone says. Well, the movie, I don't know. It's like, well, stop making shitty movies.
All right, we have a final question. Bring us home.
It's better be good, buddy.
No pressure.
Sorry, brain fried there for a second. Just wanted to say I really love Band of Brothers. I've probably seen it a good half a dozen times. If my brother was here, he'd be flipping out right now. And I'd want to say, with you, in case your character, I love the scene. It's, why does everyone hate our company? It's like, no, Sobel just hates you.
Private Randleman.
That was just...
Doesn't hate Easy Company, he just hates you. Yep.
But yeah, that show was completely incredible. Thank you and everybody else who made it for making it, because it was just blew my mind, especially since it came out like 2 years after Saving Private Ryan. I'm like, okay, they're keeping this going. And it just, in the case of that, it's like...
Easy Company, 101st, the Easy Company, Private Ryan was in the 101st.
Oh, okay.
That's where Tom found the book. He was doing research on the 101st Airborne, and he found this book, and he took it to Steven and said, hey, we got to make this.
Oh, nice.
So Ryan dropped in.
Right.
So...
But again, thank you, all of you, for doing an incredible, terrific show. I watch it when they show it on cable, like every Veterans Day. I'm at least watching a few episodes. So
Awesome.
thank you very, very much for it.
Thank you. I appreciate
Also,
you.
thank you for The Walking Dead.
Thank you.
And what we can't talk about that's going on right now, too. Thank you for that as well.
Thank you. Thanks.
And thank you, Michael, for spending this time with us. We are out of time, unfortunately, but definitely you want to visit him at his stable. And
thank you for coming to our TED Talk. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.
This is Ross Marquand, and you are watching Fandom Spotlight, which is awesome. So like, share, and subscribe. Oh, and have fun and follow your fandom.